Oh, what a difference a week can. Wandy Rodriguez no longer with the Pirates. Ray Shira is no longer with the Penguins, and people all of a sudden like the Pirates again because of their MVP, Josh Harrison. Well, that's how it's been, and we took a week off the podcast, and that just shows how much can change. I'm Mike Waterloo, and I'm joined by Mr. Gar Mercury there in the black shirt on the left, and Mr. John Penline coming to us from Norfolk, Virginia there in his, I think that's an Altoona Curve hat, John?
Northern Virginia, but yeah, Altoona Curve, yep.
Oh, I thought you said Norfolk. I apologize. Yeah,
Sorry.
same. If that's even a city in Virginia, I believe it is. But guys, how we doing after the 13-day absence?
Pretty good.
Yeah, a lot happened. Yeah, a lot happened these last couple of weeks. It's gonna be fun to rehash and hopefully extrapolate a few positives out of it.
And Gar, you just had a successful day yesterday at the track and field state championship. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was a long weekend in Shippensburg, Pennsylvania, but after what was, I can only say, nightmarish weather throughout the last 3 months, it was nice to have blue skies, and actually District 7, the WPIL, had a tremendous weekend. So I know Michael White wrote about it a little bit in the Post-Gazette. Only a couple factual errors made in these articles, but the fact of the matter is it was a good weekend, no doubt.
Well, good to hear.
Thanks for asking. Yeah, thanks for asking.
Oh, no problem. And John's back home visiting the folks this weekend in his Wiz Khalifa-themed room, or black and yellow room, whatever it is there. But, guys, let's start
I want a donut at Busch Gardens.
What was that?
I want a donut at Busch Gardens.
Hey, you can't beat that. I did see you post some pictures of some roller coasters there, so very jealous there. Well, let's get right into it like we do every week that we go on air, and that is start with our player of the week. And this week is a guy who has had a knack for making little runs throughout his career, and that is Mr. Josh Harrison, the scrappiest of scrappy players, as people like to use that term. This week, he went 7 for 24 for a 342 average, and on the season, he's hitting 293, 338, 480, 2 homers and 7 RBIs, and Pirates have won, what, 4 straight now? 5 straight? 4 straight? And a lot of people say it's because of Josh Harrison. So congrats, Josh. You get our player of the week, both on air and on print, coming out today or tomorrow. So, guys, let's segue that right into our Pirates discussion and talk about Josh Harrison a little bit. You know, it seems to me like he does this every single year. He always has these little streaks where he looks like he's the real deal. He looks more than just an average bench player that sometimes you wonder, why is he on the 25-man roster? But he comes up with the big hits. He gives his all every time he's on the field. And does this make you feel a little bit more comfortable leaving Polanco down there an extra 2 to 3 weeks because of the way Josh Harrison has been playing? Or is this just kind of a flash in the pan in one good week, if you will?
Go ahead, Gar, since Mike still doesn't like to give directions.
Hey, Gar, I am going to ask you to please address this first. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, you know, I don't know that it necessarily makes me more comfortable about the whole Gregory Polanco situation. I think since we started talking, I think he just hit another homer and triple. But Josh Harrison, I mean, what can you say about the guy? I mean, you make a great point. He does go on these crazy streaks where he just seems like he's a guy that you should have in there every day. But, you know, you'll win with guys like Josh Harrison. I mean, I know that's a cliche thing to say, but he really is one of those guys that he's a spark plug off the bench. And, I mean, how many players in the league can you literally put in just about every position on the field and not feel like you're in deep trouble? I mean, he can play anywhere on the field, and he's done a pretty nice job in right field. And I know we've talked about it enough, but right field's been a real problem, and you know they've been able to use him in a variety of different situations, but the right field hole that the Pirates have had, he's done a really nice job of coming in. And you know, the other thing is we've talked about just not really having somebody who you can plug into that leadoff spot. He seems like a guy that at least, you know, in spurts can do that job. And I love Josh Harrison, if nothing else, just for the energy and the passion that he brings to the field every day. You never feel like you're getting a a lazy at bat or an inning off, and that's something that really is awesome about Josh Harrison. And you just ride the hot hand and keep counting down the days till you can bring Gregory Polanco up. I wish he was a little bit better at shortstop because I hate to bang on our starting shortstop, Jordy Mercer, but if he was just a little bit better defensively, he might be a guy that you could plug in there and use a little bit more often. But he's done a nice job. Hopefully he can keep it going.
Now, Mr.
Yeah, I mean, he's not.
Pass it to you. Go ahead.
He's not a poor man's Pete Rose. He's more of an impoverished man's Pete Rose. But nevertheless, he does give you that kind of energy. I mean, he's just, you know, you called him a spark plug. It's exactly what he is. And he doesn't really have any one tool that you can point at and say, oh, okay, well, he's really, you know, he's got a lot of power. He hits, you know, for average, or he's really fast, or he's got a good glove or anything. But he just kind of makes the play whenever they ask him to. And I mean, as far as being more or less comfortable with Gregory Polanco being down in AAA, I mean, we all knew that Gregory Polanco wasn't going to come up from pretty much the start of the season. So he's definitely made it easier for the Pirates. And you could say that this week has really been all about him because he's made like 2 or 3 game-saving catches, and he's had, you know, he had the go-ahead home run against the Yankees last Sunday. So I mean, you know, hopefully he can kind of keep it going for the next couple weeks until Polanco can come up. But you know, I mean, the problem really was never in right field. It's always been on the mound so far for this team. But yeah, I mean, they'll definitely take, you know, what Harrison's doing right now. They'll take it and run with it.
Now, say Harrison keeps this up for the next few weeks here. Once, you know, the supposed Super 2 deadline passes, somewhere around June, 10th to 14th is the suspected date for that. Say for some reason Josh Harrison keeps hitting about 300, puts together another homer, keeps making these highlight reel plays. Obviously, they're going to bring Gregory Polanco up. Josh Harrison isn't going to stop anybody from coming up, let's be honest. But where do you put him? Do you just use him as a utility man? Do you put him as kind of like your 6th man off the bench in the basketball terms? Do you rotate him in each day? Or do you try to stick him as shortstop even though that's his worst defensive position? John?
No, if you put him at shortstop, you're kind of trying to, you know, put a square peg in a round hole. I mean, you have to have your best fielder there, sort of. I mean, Clint Barmas, but you know, you can't have a guy who's shaky at short. I mean, you just can't afford to have that. I would probably platoon him. I don't know about platoon, but I would mix him in with Pedro Alvarez, especially against the left-handed pitcher at third base. I'd put him there before I'd put him anywhere else. I think that you know, you have to kind of see the writing on the wall for Travis Snyder. I think that, you know, if they call up Gregory Polanco, I wouldn't be surprised if he got sent down or if they had to DFA him. Just because Polanco is left-handed, Snyder hasn't done anything this year. Tabata has actually been pretty solid, you know, on and off, but he's had some moments where he's actually hit the ball pretty hard. He had the sacrifice fly last night. But, yeah, Josh Harrison, I would put him back in the infield. You know, maybe if Marte's, like, really struggling, you put Polanco in left and you put Harrison in right if you really want to, you know, experience that adventure. But I think ultimately I would put him at third and mix him in with Alvarez.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with John more. I mean, you've got, you know, like I had alluded to, and I agree, shortstop is probably his worst position. I mean, he's only played first a couple of times, but you have enough variables, and he does a nice enough job adjusting on the fly. You can put him in left field. You can put him at second base. You can give him a spot start at third. He can go any number of places. And you're not going to miss too much of a beat. I mean, that's just really the bottom line with the guy. You know, the other thing is, you know, as we talk about Gregory Polanco and kind of riding things out until we get to that Super 2 date, you know, it's kind of nice to see the Pirates maybe making a little bit of a run, because if they can just kind of get close to 500 over the next couple of weeks, get to that point, maybe even jump over the Reds. I believe they're only a half game from being in third place now. All of a sudden, you kind of put yourself in a position where you can bring up a guy who could I hate going with that Yasuo Puig comparison, but you could be bringing in a guy who could have that kind of impact as you're close to 500 and within reach of the Brewers, who have kind of cooled down a little bit. The Cardinals are gonna come together here pretty quickly. They've got a ton of home games coming up, I think, over the next month. But if you can kind of get back into that wild card race before you get into July and August, who knows? And you could be bringing in a guy who could just be lightning in a bottle. And there are enough places for Josh Harrison where you can find places to put him. It's not like Starling Marte has been great. You can give him an off day. It isn't like right field has been somewhere where you feel great every day bringing somebody like Jose Tabata in there. So you've got some options for him.
And I will say for Harrison, it's short. He's played 31 games there, and 74 chances he's committed, 4 errors, 946 fielding percentage. So I think he just kind of gets the rap as a bad defensive player, and once you get that, it kind of sticks with you. I wouldn't want him there every day, don't get me wrong, but I wouldn't mind having him in. I'd take him there over Jordy Mercer, to be completely honest with you. I'd rather put Tony there. Oh, absolutely I would. Jordy Mercer's not that good of a player. He's a 4A player. He's a great guy, but he's just not that good of a player. So I'd rather have...
But there's more to there's more to fielding at short than just how many errors you made. And I know that you know that, but it's also about the route that you can take on a ball. It's about the release and having the ability and being comfortable with making those awkward kind of plays. And I would trust Jordy Mercer more than Josh Harrison. I know everybody hates Jordy Mercer, but honestly, I mean, he's been a shortstop his whole life. I think he would have I think he'd just be a lot more comfortable making those plays than Josh Harrison would. And I think if you put Josh Harrison in a situation where he's playing almost every day, which is really what we're talking about when it comes to where we would put him once Polanco comes up, I think we would see him get exposed pretty badly.
He did that in 2012, though, at least at the plate. He had a 10-game hitting streak, 10 games in a row whenever they started him, so he handled that fairly well. I definitely agree with the comfort level, 100%, but I don't know, Jordy Mercer doesn't have that strong of an arm. You said he's played his whole life. It really hasn't shown. Obviously, from a defensive stance, I'd rather have Barmes, Mercer than Harrison, but as a total package, I think I'd rather have Harrison in there over Mercer. But let's get into the Polanco talk, which seems like we have to do every single week. And Dejan Kavakovic, hate him or love him, he's, to me, the best writer in Pittsburgh, even though I don't agree with him. He wrote a very interesting column saying separating nutting myth from reality, and a lot of it had to do with Gregory Polanco. And Gar, I'll be completely honest, when I read this, I'm like, this reminds me of Gar, because I know that you are not Nutting's biggest fan at all. So did you guys have a chance to read it? And if so, what were your thoughts? Gar, we'll start with you.
Well, first off, I do want to tell you I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think Dejan is as good a writer as Pittsburgh has. I found myself constantly nodding in approval of things that he writes, whether it's on Twitter or his columns. And, I did have to laugh, and I thought of John, and I thought of you also when I read the article. And, the reality is I'm not as anti-Bob Nutting in terms of policy as one might think. I mean, it's hard sometimes. You viscerally want to respond as a fan, and we've all been guilty of it at some point in our lives. And you go to, is he taking his profits and investing it in Seven Springs and things like that? I do understand the economics of baseball well enough to understand that his hands are tied to a great extent. This is not a situation where he's going to suddenly join, the Tigers, the Angels, the Yankees, the Red Sox of the world, and be able to just write blank checks. But I guess my biggest problem is you've consistently been in that bottom 3 to 5 in payroll the entire time that you've been here, and that's fine up to a certain point. And I guess my biggest problem with ownership has been investing in the team now. But, I thought about this a lot this morning after I reread the article, and I'm thinking of you and John. One of the things that I kind of thought about and tried to step back from was maybe the team last year wasn't as great as we thought. It was lightning in a bottle. Everything went right. Their bullpen did things that were a complete anomaly. the starting pitching wasn't nearly as good as we thought, and maybe they are going through a process where we're looking at the next 2 or 3 years before they're going to be a true contender. And to spend, I get it. That doesn't make a lot of sense. And all of a sudden, Ike Davis is looking like he's a pretty decent acquisition. Would I rather have them gone out and sold the farm to try to get Jose Abreu? Absolutely. I would have loved to do that. But, there are some issues with the economics that maybe I don't understand as well. And maybe it isn't as easy to just drop $15 million a year on a guy who could be the AL MVP this year if he gets healthy soon. But, there is a plan in place. I hope that Bob Nutting and the rest of the organization is looking at a plan and a bigger picture than maybe your average fan is doing. But I did like the article. It made a lot of sense. It's hard. I mean, I'm a little older than you guys. I was I think 18 years old when the Pirates lost to the Braves that second year in a row, and it was hard because I was always just a huge Pirates fan, and year after year after year, you want something. So hopefully the Pirates do know what they're doing, and they're going to invest wisely. I'll leave with this point. They have made an effort to re-sign or try to get some of their young talent to sign. It's very heartening to see that they're going after Gregory Polanco early. They locked up a Starling Marte. I mean, those are savvy moves. They're moves that a small organization like the Pirates have to make. Hopefully they'll continue to make smart moves, and some of these young pitchers will be ready to go over the next couple of years, and guys like me will shut up about Bob Nutting.
Yeah, I read the article, and I mean, it really wasn't a surprise at all. I mean, I think for some people it was, just because, and it's not even you, Gar, because I know that we've talked before, and you've been pretty critical of the owner, and the things you've been critical about, I mean, it's not outrageous to say the least, but just some of the people, and certain radio show hosts that I've been battling with over the last week, and it's just getting so tiring right now because he doesn't know anything about baseball. But it kind of confirms some things that I think a lot of people thought happened, and they actually didn't happen. Sending all the money to Seven Springs, I mean, that's illegal. The fact that the attendance increased, and because the attendance increased, that means that Bob was supposed to go out and spend $20 million that he supposedly received from that, when in reality it was only a couple $1 million, which, as Dayon pointed out, will get you maybe a decent middle reliever. So, but I just think at the end of the day, a lot of the people, especially in Pittsburgh, they're just not going to believe it. I mean, they believe what they believe. They think that Bob Nutting is a billionaire, therefore he needs to spend $1 billion on his payroll, and it's just not realistic. I mean, the Pirates didn't really increase their payroll at all after last season, but none of the other teams did either. I mean, a lot of the other teams didn't increase their payroll. Hats off to the Chicago White Sox for getting Jose Abreu, but he was a guy that wasn't seen as a 4 or 5 tool player like guys like Puig and Cespedes were, and I think that Abreu owes a lot of his money to those two guys, because he got, $70 million out of the deal, which was more than what they got, but they play outfield. They're guys that, they can throw the ball, they can steal bases. Abreu's basically just a two-tool hitter, a two-tool player. He can hit, and he can, for average, he can hit for power, and that's about it. I mean, he can barely even play first base. He's probably going to be a DH in the future. I think a lot of people were upset that they didn't get Abreu, and I think they saw that as an opportunity to kind of go after the ownership and say, well, you had an opportunity to upgrade, at the only real position you had a major flaw in, and you didn't do it. And then, of course, with the Gregory Polanco thing, that only made it worse. So, yeah, I mean, I like the article. Dayon and I don't really see eye to eye either, but I do like the article. It was well written. He is definitely, him and Joe Starkey, I think they're the top 2 writers that in the entire city. But I thought it was well put together. I kind of wonder how many people actually changed their mind after reading it.
That's funny you touched on Starkey. We're going to touch on his column on Crosby in a bit here, but yeah, I don't I think the big thing you mentioned that they didn't fill the hole in the whole Polanco thing. The big thing to me is the Pirates aren't winning. So whenever they're not winning, that's when people want to point out everything. So that's what it is in the grand scheme. My favorite part of the column was the very last part when he says the myth, the Pirates are too cheap to prioritize the present. In reality, Wandy Rodriguez. I think that said it all right there. Like, to me, that's kind of the Wandy Rodriguez mic drop walk away. That's all you have to say.
Well, and they get criticized for not re-signing Bird, although not as much because we all know that right field, is taken care of at least for the next 8 years, hopefully. But they, not re-signing AJ Burnett, not keeping Justin Morneau. I think a lot of people forgot that Justin Morneau wasn't playing that well, and a lot of people here didn't like Justin Morneau when he was playing here for this.
He was horrible here. He put in thin air. What's he going to do? Hit home runs like any player you put out in Coors.
Right, and then on top of that, I mean, the AJ Burnett thing. Yeah, I mean, maybe they didn't want to tender him because they just didn't want to. They didn't want to bring him back. I mean, the $12 million offer they gave him was a joke, and they probably shouldn't have done that at all. But I mean, the Phillies, they got Marlon Byrd, they have AJ Burnett, and they have the same record as the Pirates. They have the third highest payroll in the league, and they're battling in the basement with the New York Mets, which I think you and I might have predicted, and I think, Gar, you had them around there as well at the beginning of the season. But, and then you look at the Red Sox. They're in dead last place. They've lost 9 in a row. I think they have the second or fourth highest payroll. I mean, the money doesn't say, that doesn't buy you wins anymore. It just, it's not the early 2000s. I mean, you just can't go out and buy all these $200 million free agents. I mean, the Angels are trying to get a return on their investment for Hamilton and Pujols and all those guys. They're battling to get, into the upper echelon of the American League. But the team that spends the 25th most amount of money in Major League Baseball, the Oakland A's, are 11 games over 500, and they're pushing for their third consecutive division title. So, I mean, it's about what you invest in. It's about, where you think the prospects should go and how you manage the team. It's not about how much money you spend. And I wish more people, in Pittsburgh kind of realized that. It's not the same as when McClatchy ran the team into the ground with ridiculous contracts to guys like Jason Kendall, which forced them to trade guys like Aramis Ramirez. I think this ownership group, they're not perfect, but I think that they're also understanding that they can't go out on a whim and sign all these big deals, because if they do, they can end up in a huge amount of financial trouble, and it can end in basically what we saw around the mid-2000s.
Now, on Polanco, one more thing about him. Am I the only person who doesn't expect him to tear the cover off the ball when he comes up and be an MVP caliber player and be the Yasiel Puig type player? Am I the only one who realizes that when rookies come up, 9 times out of 10 they struggle? So is that just a Yinzer thing that people don't understand? Is that just a fam thing? And how long are they going to how long will they put up with him not succeeding, if you will? If he puts up if he doesn't put up the 300 batting average, the 10 home runs out of the gate, the 25 RBIs, the 74 steals in this first week. Gar?
There are two real dangerous things going on here with Gregory Polanco. First off, Gregory Polanco, his reputation preceded him, and then this year, in his first full year in AAA, he's just lighting it up. And, I even did it. I was, right off the bat, what did I do when we first started talking about Gregory Polanco? I brought up Yasiel Puig. And there's a real problem there. Yasiel Puig came in like a comet last year, and we're prisoners of recency. We want to immediately go, well, look what Yasiel Puig did. This is automatically what we should expect of Gregory Polanco. It's not real fair. And then the other problem that we're running into is Pirates fans are looking for hope right now. They're looking for that knight in shining armor to come in and make everything better, get us back into the race, give us that feeling that we've had the last couple of years as the Pirates have been competing for playoff spots and have been near the top of the standings. And it's going to be very interesting to see how Polanco responds. The one thing I will say, and I'm no expert, I've never been around Gregory Polanco, I have never seen him play to this point, is you keep hearing about his maturity, about his discipline at the plate, how well he approaches the game at a young age. And that could work to his benefit. I mean, you never hear those things about Yasiel Puig. And I'll go to my grave saying that Gregory Polanco has every bit the talent of Yasiel Puig, and if he can take that maturity and that approach that he supposedly has and bring it to the Pirates, I don't think there's any reason to think that he can't come in and make a real impact. And the last point I'll make is I'm not as down on the Pirates lineup as a lot of people are. You know, Pedro Alvarez has not been hitting the baseball very well. But you know what? Maybe you put a guy like Gregory Polanco behind him, and all of a sudden he's seeing a lot more pitches and he's doing a lot more at the plate. Neil Walker is playing very well. Even our MVP, Andrew McCutchen, he hasn't been that great to this point. You're talking about, you know, 3 or 4 guys there that can really heat up, and all of a sudden a guy like Gregory Polanco can come in, get comfortable, have some guys around him that can contribute offensively, and who knows. But it is dangerous, and I'm guilty of it. I did it right off the bat. I immediately equated Gregory Polanco unfairly with Yasiel Puig, but I'm excited as hell to see this kid play because I've been talking about him for 3 years, and I just can't wait. I think he's going to be an awesome player, and I think he can come in and he can do a great job, and hopefully Pirates fans will give the kid a break if he isn't Yasiel Puig.
Well, I remember when Starling Marte came up and he hit a home run on the first pitch he saw, and we thought, oh, this is Arriba, this is the next Clemente, and now that's not looking too good. The only thing I would give Polanco to his advantage is as you said, Gar, he's a little bit more disciplined. He's got a better idea of the strike zone, and he doesn't swing and miss too much. He has more strikeouts than you would think, though, in AAA. But I think overall he's a much better contact hitter. Obviously, the power is still coming along, and it's still going to develop because he's still growing into his body. But if he came up and he played like Yasiel Puig did last year, I would be stunned. I mean, it's just a different league. You know, the guys just, you know, they just don't miss their spots usually. I mean, the pitchers just don't miss their spots, especially unless they're, you know, Wandy Rodriguez. But I would say that he will make an impact. I would be surprised if he came up and started off kind of cold like Pedro Alvarez did. I remember there was a lot of hype for Alvarez's first game up. I went to that game, and I think he struck out on his first at bat, and it was like, and then he also airmailed the ball into the third row later on in that game. So it was just a sign of things to come. But you know, I think he will make an impact. You know, it's just right now with the way that Josh Harrison's playing, I wouldn't be surprised if he kind of carried that. I mean, if he kind of did that, it wouldn't be that much of a shock to me. I don't think he would have to dive or jump for as many balls because he's a better outfielder and he's taller. But honestly, I don't think. I think what we're seeing out of Harrison right now, right now, you know, like this week, I think that's something that Gregory Polanco can do, and I think that's something that they're looking to kind of take, you know, with him to the next level. I think they want him to be a little bit better in the future, but I think people do need to temper their expectations. And quite honestly, this team is not going to compete unless they start pitching better. That's been my argument from the start. The starting pitching hasn't been very good. They've recently been doing pretty well. The bullpen has blown, 10 or 11 saves. They're starting to get things back together. I liked what I saw out of Grilly the other night, you know, throwing 93, 94 consistently, had a nice bite to his slider. But if they can't pitch, they're not going to win. And you can have Gregory Polanco, you can have, you know, Babe Ruth, you know, at first base. It doesn't matter. I mean, if you can't stop the other team from scoring, you're going to lose. So that's kind of my focus when it comes to, you know, how will the Pirates get back into it. But with Polanco, I mean, I could definitely see him, you know, helping out the lineup a lot, and I could see him, you know, even as a leadoff hitter, I think he kind of would protect Walker and McCutchen a little bit more.
In-depth analysis you can only find at Pittsburgh Sporting News. If Gregory Polanco turns into Josh Harrison, you guys have a winner, folks. That's all you have to worry about. If he can live up to those expectations, we're A-OK. Somebody who hasn't lived up to his expectations really this year, and it's not really surprising me, is Wandy Rodriguez, who the Pirates let him walk after a interesting start earlier this week where I thought the game was going to take 7 hours because they scored, 13 runs in the first 2 innings or something like that. You guys surprised to see Wandy go? And do you think he'll pitch again in baseball? I personally do. I think the Phillies are going to pick him up. But Gar, we'll start with you. Sorry.
Well, Michael, I don't want to pat you on the back 2 shows in a row, but boy, you were spot on about old Wandy Rodriguez. You know, the biggest thing about Wandy Rodriguez that I noticed is he just looked like a guy who mailed it in. He said, you know what, I am going to definitely take that player option, and I'm going to mail it in. And he just looked like a guy who didn't care. Now, the velocity was clearly down, and it might have even been you, John, who posted on Twitter his pitch speed, or was it you, Michael? Somebody pitched every one of his pitches. It was like 87, 88, 88, 88, 89, 88, and they literally broke down every pitch that he threw in that debacle that was his last appearance with the Pirates. And it's just, you just shook your head. He just looked like a guy who had completely given up. And you know what? I give it, getting back to the whole Bob Nutting and the Pirates are cheap, and I know Dejan made a great point there in his last 2 words of that article. I mean, I give the Pirates a lot of credit for not just simply saying, you know what, we gotta ride this out. We've got $13.5 million invested in this guy. They did the right thing, and hopefully Brandon Compton can come in, or if it's Jeff Locke, fine, but anyone will be better in that 5th spot than Wandy Rodriguez. They needed to move on. I give them credit for doing it. You wait too long, and you just cannot continually waste those starts. It's just it racks your bullpen. It's not good in any way. Kudos to the Pirates for making a decision before June.
Yeah, I mean if you notice, the team in general just has everybody has a lot shorter of a leash than they did last year. I mean, remember how long they hung on to Brandon Inge and that saga, how long that lasted. And they just, it doesn't matter. I mean, with Wandy Rodriguez, look, this donut here, you know how you win one of these? You have to knock down 2 out of 3 plates, and you get 3 rubber baseballs. They're like T-ball baseballs. Wandy Rodriguez could not throw hard enough, and he could also not hit the plates to win this donut. So if he can't win the donut, he doesn't even belong anywhere near a Major League roster. That's how I see it. I mean, it's 87, 88 is pretty slow, especially when every pitcher in the world is blowing out their arms throwing 104. But on top of the fact that you're throwing the ball belt high, down the middle, inside half of the plate, letter high. I mean, those guys, they're just not going to miss. I mean, hitting a baseball is one of the hardest things you can do in any sport. But with Wandy Rodriguez, it looks like he's just throwing batting practice out there. And yeah, Gar, I agree to an extent. I mean, I don't know if he mailed it in, but he definitely looked like a guy who just knew that he was done. Like, he knew that his stuff was gone and that he had nothing left. I mean, obviously you want to try to stay in the league as long as you can, but I think he pretty much knew, like, it just wasn't going to work out. And they said it was the knee. I bet his knee wasn't even really that bad. It was just, just part of the fact that he just couldn't throw the ball hard anymore. He's had arthritis in his throwing elbow last year, and he's not a very big guy, and he's been pitching for a while. And, it's just, maybe it's just time for him to move on. And, I think they got the best possible result out of that game that they could. They won, but he gave up 6 runs in less than 2 innings. So, I don't think it could have gone any better for the Pirates.
Yeah, and like I said, I was being dead serious when I said he goes to Philadelphia because that's just what they do. Let's touch real quick on Neil Walker before we switch over to some Penguins talk. And last year I got criticized for that Neil Walker is nothing but an average second baseman, and I still think that's all he really is. But he looks to be really, really finding his groove this year. He already has 10 home runs, which is 6 off his career best of 16 hit last year, hitting 257, 332, 449 slash line. But it just looks like he's kind of he's found something out. Do you guys think even at age, however old he is right now, 27, I think, 28, that he's actually finding his groove, getting into his prime? Is that possible, or do you think Neil Walker just is who he is at this point? And Gar, we'll start with you again.
I tell you what, I remember watching Neil Walker when he was at Pine Richland High School play, and when the Pirates drafted him, I thought they were getting a guy that could potentially have, a plus bat at the catcher position. He's obviously transitioned to second base, and you just keep waiting. He had that 15 homer, 84 RBI year there a few years back, and you're thinking, all right, it's on. This kid's gonna find a way to be, a plus hitter at second base. And the last couple of years have been a real disappointment. It's just so great to see him hitting the baseball the way he is. One, just from a personal standpoint, because he's a really good guy. I mean, he's a flat-out good guy. Coupled with that Yinzer plus factor of him being, from the area, that always makes it a little bit more fun. But, the bottom line is he really looks like he's finding his stroke as a hitter. It doesn't completely surprise me, Mike, because he's always been a guy who's a very, very hard worker and a guy who really seems to be right on that precipice. And he seems to have found his stroke. Whether or not it's going to be one of those, flash in the pan Josh Harrison, streaks, or it's going to be something that he's going to be able to do consistently. This year we're going to find out, no doubt about it. You would hope it's not because he's going into free agency at the end of the year, or is eligible for free agency. But I've really thought that he could be, a 20 homer, approaching 100 RBI guy at his very ceiling. And he's starting to look like he might be that guy. And if he is, you can live with the fact that he's okay defensively. That has always been my problem with Jordy Mercer. Jordy Mercer he's okay defensively, but you've kind of always thought, okay, this guy's 6'3", he's 200 pounds. Maybe he's a guy who can rake a little bit and deal with that other part of the equation. But, with Neil, the hope is, he can rake. He can be a guy that you can plug in and can give you some RBIs and can come up with some clutch hits, because the Pirates offensively are just going to be a different team if a guy like Neil Walker can contribute consistently. So hopefully this is something we're going to see, the next few months, and it's going to cost us, but it'll be certainly worth it if we can get the Pirates back into the fold in the NL Central.
They need to get him to quit hitting left-handed, because he's a better right-handed hitter this year. He's batting .313 as a righty, and I think he's hitting .245 as a lefty. But yeah, I mean, I'd put him at I agree with you, Mike. He's an average to above average second baseman. I mean, defensively, he's pretty solid. And he's been able to hit a little bit this year. I mean, the 10 home runs is definitely a plus, especially since Pedro's kind of, I'm not going to say his power has fallen off. I mean, if the guy makes contact, it's gonna go. But he just hasn't been hitting very well this year, even for his standards. But he's been a solid 2 or 5 hitter. So I mean, it's what you need. It's something that I'm sure that they're enjoying right now from their second baseman. But I mean, maybe give him an extra year or two. If he's coming up for free agency or arbitration, I just, part of me just thinks that he's going to save a spot. But he's basically keeping a seat warm for Alan Hansen, because I don't see Alan Hansen as the shortstop of the future for the Pirates. I think he's going to end up being the second baseman there. I could see Neil Walker possibly moving to third and the team moving on from Pedro Alvarez, whether it's a trade or in free agency, but that's a little bit further down the road. I think for right now, though, I just think he's just having a great year. I mean, he's hitting the ball out. Maybe he can get to 20 home runs this year. Maybe he can shock the world a little bit and get 25 home runs. I mean, you're talking about, he's got double digits, and we're only, 6 or 7 weeks into the season. So I don't think it's completely out of the question. But at the same time, I mean, Neil Walker is just a solid baseball player. I mean, that's just, you can't really say, well, I mean, I've heard some people, I read one article, it was on Bleacher Report, so it's not really even an article, but it said, that he should be the captain of the Pirates. Give me a break. Somebody else wanted him to go to the All-Star game, and he's having a really good year, but if you look at the other NL second baseman, there's still a decent amount of guys ahead of him. So, but I think for what the Pirates need, they don't need Neil Walker to be the guy that carries the team. He just needs to come up with a couple hits every now and then, and he's done that so far.
Yeah, Neil Walker's all right, but he's no Jed Jorka, I'll tell you that. A couple other Pirates topics we forgot to talk about here, and I heard a rumor that Jason Grilli is scheduled to pitch today. Like, he's okay to close if his book signing at the local Barnes & Noble was done by then. He came out with a autobiography talking about Jason Grilli, the trials and tribulations of who I've been. I've been to hell and back because of my injury. I've had the roughest life ever as a number 4 overall pick who was a bust, and rediscover my career at the age of 36. But when you see him on Twitter, always interacting with fans on there. Now you can find me at the local bookstore signing my book in the middle of the Pirates season, even though we're 5 games under 500, because I really don't care. I just want to get this book out here, and I want to make my money off of it. I feel about it. Gar, what's your thoughts on Jason Gurley's book signings he's doing throughout the course of the season? Does it bother you much?
First off, when you sent me the topics, I thought you had made a grammatical error and you meant Grilly's back is what I thought you were saying. And then I looked into it a little bit more, and I'm like, it's a book signing. Oh, my. You know, a quick anecdote. I think one of the first series of the season in Cincinnati, my mind was absolutely blown. I guess there's some grilled cheese place in Cincinnati that's real popular. He was literally filming a commercial the day of a game in Cincinnati. I'm like, you know, maybe you should focus on pitching a little bit more. You know, God bless the guy. I mean, he's hit the ground running with the whole marketing campaign, and I get it. You know, there's life after baseball, but you know, you make a very good point. I mean, right now, it's one thing to be doing the whole feel-good thing when you're lights out and you're an all-star closer and your team's in first place, but when you're just struggling to get back into the mix after an abysmal start, might I add, in no small part because of what you didn't do on the mound, you can't be doing this stuff. You need to get focused. And, you know, you got time for all that. You got plenty of cachet right now with Pittsburgh. Get your butt into the clubhouse and get yourself ready to go. I mean, I had to laugh when I saw that. There's no doubt about it. You know, get it together, Jason. There's plenty of time for marketing. Hey, if $1 Million Arm can get a movie made, maybe you can be next, Jason. But why don't you figure out how the hell you're going to get some people out first before you're worried about doing book signings and grilled cheese commercials in a rival city?
I don't expect these athletes to breathe baseball or breathe football, whatever their respective sport is, 24 hours a day. All they're doing is working their jobs. That's like us going to work, coming home, and that's it. I don't expect that, but I just think it's ridiculous, especially whenever he sucks. He's not even that good of a pitcher, mind you, at all. He was in, AAA Lehigh 2 or 3 years ago. He's not that good of a pitcher, and he's doing this in the middle of a season when the Pirates suck. He can't do this in the offseason. There's not a different time to do this. He's reminding me of Ryan Clark going on ESPN First Take or SportsCenter, preparing for his after his career, what he wants to do then. That's okay, I guess. I don't know why. It just irks me. It just irks me a lot. It's good he's preparing for what he's doing after his baseball career is over, which is after this season. But come on, the timing is poor.
So what time was the game during the book signing? Like 7 o'clock?
Yeah. Like he does it on weekends from like 3 o'clock or from like 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock. Players have to report at 2:45 at the stadium for the 7 o'clock game.
It was 11 to 12. It was 11 to 12.
He's done many of them though, John. He hasn't just done one. I see it every single day I log on to Twitter. Hey guys, make sure you find me this week at this local place. I'm going to sign books. Maybe you can stand in line and get your picture taken with me.
I just pictured Jason Grilli from 1 o'clock to 7 o'clock sitting at his locker, full uniform on like this. Just ultimate focus about everything. I mean, come on, man. It's, you know, they have so many games over the course of the season. The fact that he wasn't getting people out wasn't because he was at a book signing or because in the middle of the pitch he thought, I wonder how many people bought my book today. It's because, you know, he was hurt, supposedly, or he doesn't have a whole lot left of the tank and he's just grooving fastballs. I mean, if the stuff is there, which it was the other night, I don't care. You know, get people out. As long as you get people out, that's fine. You know, he was getting crushed earlier, but like I said, his fastball was down, his curve or his slider wasn't breaking. I don't think it's because his arm was tired from signing books. I think it was because he got hurt because he's old. You know, and you know what? I might buy the book just to make you mad. But you know, the big
Why
thing
do it
is
now?
that,
Why not wait till the off season? I mean, come on, the timing's just horrible. It's stupid.
But I mean, the off season is what, like 2 months, and it's in the middle of winter. Nobody cares about Jason Grilli during Steelers season.
Nobody
I mean,
cares about Jason Gurley now.
But obviously, enough people do if he's having enough people come out to do all these book signings. And I don't. There's so much stuff that these guys do, including in the minor leagues, that they probably don't even. They're wired almost like machines because they do stuff like this all the time. The Altoona Curve, I was reading in their little promotions, they sign a bunch of autographs at like a little table at a I'm going to say Food Lion because I'm in Virginia, but like at a Giant Eagle. You know, they're there signing autographs every Sunday, 4 hours before the game. It doesn't mean that they're not focused about the game, but you know, you'll wear yourself out in a 162 game season if all you're doing is sitting there every day waiting for the game to start. You won't make it through April. So I mean, what he does in, you know, outside of that 2:30 to 11:30, you know, amount of time, you know, for those games where they have to be there until the game ends. I mean, what he does outside of that time, who cares? As long as he's not getting in trouble, I don't really care what he's doing.
And for anybody who does care, his next signing's next Friday, June 6th, or whenever Friday that is. Then we have Wednesday, June 11th, Thursday, June 12th, Friday, June 27th, Saturday, July 19th, and finally August 9th, Saturday at the
Is there anything near Avalon? Because I'd like to get him to sign the book for me.
No, but there's one in Homestead,
Nope.
New Kensington, Freeport Road, Century Plaza, Giant Eagle, Cranberry, Gar, you can go and hit that one up. That's not too far away, right? Giant Eagle and 800 Commons Boulevard at the Barnes & Noble and Settlers Road. So, no, it doesn't look like there's any by you there, John, but trust me, I'm sure that Jason Gurley will take the time. He might even do it during the middle of a playoff game. He'll just take the time and sign your book for you because he cares that much.
Hey,
Good.
Mike, I have a quick question for both of you guys.
Yeah.
First off, John, is that Michael Huff that Heinz Ward is running over your left shoulder? And Mike, is that the Immaculate Reception over your left shoulder? Because I think our viewers are very curious in both situations.
Right
Go
over there. Go ahead, John.
Well, that's actually Charles Woodson.
I was wondering. It was 24. I wasn't sure if that was Woodson. If that's in Oakland, they lost that game probably. Man, that's a house of horrors. But you know,
that's a long. I mean, I don't know how long ago I got that as a gift. Half this room is empty because my parents are moving in a year. So.
And no, mine is Blast jumping in this.
Oh, nice. 71, baby. Let's go.
Yeah, so that's what that one is. Not, you will never find anything Steelers in my house. I will say that.
It was a gloomy Three Rivers background. I just couldn't quite tell if that was Franco Harris going around the corner there. Now I definitely see Steve Blass getting as high as he ever did in his life vertically. Man, that's good stuff.
Well, vertically at least. We don't know about the other way, but
yeah, right, Spaceman, huh?
And last Pirates thing while we have 10 minutes left is it looks like Brandon Compton will be the guy tomorrow. What are you guys' thoughts on Compton? John knows he is. He just picked him up in fantasy from me. He sniped him. But what's your thoughts? Do you think he's going to be the real deal? Because, I mean, he's had some good starts in AAA, but maybe I'm just the negative one. Maybe I'm turning into John Penline because I just don't think Brandon Compton's that good of a pitcher.
You're more negative than I am. That's just by law. You've always been more negative than me. It just takes up. You're just too negative to admit it.
That's probably the truth. I need to look in the mirror and reevaluate my life today and try to be more positive. So, but do you guys like Compton? John, I know you obviously like him enough.
Yeah, I mean, there's mid or low to mid 90s. I mean, he's got a lot of sink on that fastball. I mean, he's basically kind of like a Charlie Morton. You know, he's not going to strike out a lot of guys, but he's hoping that he can induce a lot of ground balls. And, you know, he throws strikes and he throws hard enough that he can fool batters every now and then. So, you know, I think at this point, I mean, you said, is he for real? I'd put him for real, as in maybe a 3 or 4 starter on this rotation. You know, if Tyone was healthy, I'd probably put Compton in the 5th spot and have Tyon in the mix somewhere. But he's going to be a lot better, I think, than Wandy Rodriguez, no question. And it's been a long time coming for him. I think he probably should have broke camp with this team, to be honest.
You know, I wasn't a big Brandon Compton fan last season until I went to that great doubleheader against the Cardinals last year, where Compton came in and really shut the Cardinals down, and what was really, in my opinion, one of the biggest wins of the season for the Pirates, and I think that was in late June. I really kind of became a guy who believed that Compton could come in and be that 4th, 5th starter. You know, is he the second coming of Garrett Cole? Clearly he is not, but I think he's a guy that you can kind of sleep like a baby, knowing he's going to probably give you 6 quality innings when he's working effectively. Maybe be a little better at times and probably a little worse to others. But, you know, like John said, I mean, anything right now is better than what we were getting from Wandy Rodriguez. And I certainly don't feel like he's a guy that, again, as a 4th or 5th starter, you're going to feel all that bad about. I'm excited to see what he can do tomorrow.
All right. And, yeah, that wraps up our Pirates talk. Now let's get into a little bit of Penguins here. Since the last time we spoke, Ray Shero is no longer the GM of the Penguins. Morehouse and Lemieux decided to let him go, but as for now, retain Dan Bylsma. I was told by a little birdie that Bylsma was supposed to appear at a golf outing earlier this week with Mario Lemieux, and Lemieux was there. Bylsma did not show up. What that means, I don't really know. But take that for what it's worth. Do you think Bylsma is soon going to join Shero in the unemployment line, or do you think that the new GM, whoever that may be, possibly Pierre McGuire, is going to retain Dan Bylsma? John.
It won't be Pierre McGuire. Stop trolling. I'm really mixed on this because I feel like Bylsma, on the one hand, Bylsma's all but, I mean, he's gone. He has to be gone. I think that, you know, I honestly think that Lemieux is basically trying to maintain his reputation of, you know, as being kind of like the nice guy and not making the difficult decisions. I mean, they say that they were 50-50 on Shero. I don't think they were 50-50 at all. I think they both wanted Shero gone, both Lemieux and Burkle. You know, and I don't think they wanted to make the decision to fire Bylsma. They want the GM to make that decision. So, you know, it won't paint, you know, Mario in a bad light for getting rid of these guys at the right time. But on the other hand, you know, I hear there's no chance he's going to come back and be the coach. There's no chance. There's very little chance that you know, that he could come back. It's a very small amount, and then all of a sudden it turns into, well, you know, it's possible that he could be the coach. I mean, that stuff just scares me. It honestly does. They're logically, there's no reason to bring back Dan Bylsma, especially after you just fired the general manager who basically hitched his wagon to him. But it wouldn't entirely surprise me if they hung on to him as well. I personally would let him go, though.
I'd be shocked if he's back. I mean, the reality is, how many times do you see a regime change, even not just at the ownership level, but at the general manager level, where they retain the former staff of the previous general manager? I mean, it just doesn't happen in professional sports almost ever, and I just don't see any scenario where Bylsma is back. You know, the bottom line is, you know, you never want to allow the groundswell or the reaction of a fan base to have a impact on what you do as an organization. But I just don't see, just from a fan standpoint, that the Pittsburgh Penguins can bring Dan Bylsma back. I think there's such a backlash against him now after another early playoff exit that I just don't see him getting the support from the city and from the fan base. I think they just need to go with a new start. You know, and as far as Shero is concerned, I was a little surprised that he was fired and Bylsma was not. But you know what? They're going to start fresh. Hopefully whoever is making the decisions, whether it's Burkle, whether it's Lemieux, hopefully they're making decisions that are forward thinking and that are going to allow the Penguins to make decisions that aren't based on what players' desires are, like 87, and they'll think about what's best for the organization as a whole.
I guess I'm in the minority, and I want to be positive. I don't want people to lose their job. Bring back Dan Bylsma. I'm a fan of it. No?
I don't understand what the infatuation with Dan Bylsma is. Not just with you, Mike, because I know you're trolling me right now, but just like they even said when they were talking when Dayon was talking to both Burkle and Lemieux, and he was getting bullied around by David Morehouse. We kind of feel like we wasted a year because they were thinking about firing those two last year, and I said that last year to let them go because of the fact that even with this super stacked team, they still couldn't get it going. I don't understand why so many people want to hang on to Dan Bylsma other than the fact that he looks good in those in-the-room reality TV show episodes that they do. I mean, you want to talk about a team that's not entirely focused on winning. I mean, they've got the cameras during the games, on the bench, in the locker room. I mean, that's something that to me seems like a distraction. And I just feel like Dan Bylsma is just part of that group. I think that they do need, obviously they need a new coach, but this needs to, the Penguins need to treat it like a game, but also like a business. I think this is one of the few things where me and the wrestling slash stripper extraordinaire on the on a certain radio station in the local town. I think that's where we kind of agree. It's too much like Disney World when you walk into Consol Energy Center, and I feel like Dan Bylsma is Mickey Mouse. I really do. I mean, they need somebody who's going to come in and be a little bit more stern, be a little bit more of a disciplinarian, and make it feel like you have to give effort to try to win. And you have to try to play hard. And I'm not saying that the team doesn't necessarily play hard, but there has to be a reason why they throw away games like they do, or like they did under Dan Bylsma. I mean, that Game 5 should have never happened. And even if you're going to lose, at least make it a tough game. They just they were just sleepwalking right through it, and it ended up costing them in the series in the end. They definitely need a coaching change, and I don't get all the Dan Bylsma love. He won a cup 5 years ago, good for him. He got embarrassed in the Olympics after they won the first 3 games because his team couldn't score any goals afterward. So, it's just the whole thing. It just doesn't make any sense to me. There's no reason to hang on to this guy any longer than they did Shiro.
He's a hell of a coach to me. Sorry. Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just I love Dan Bylsma that much. I mean, that the country thought that he was fit to lead their team in the Olympics, that they extended him to 3 years. Yeah, I don't know. I'm okay if they keep him. I'm okay if they get rid of him. But I still think he's a hell of a coach. So
I'm going to piggyback real quick on what you're saying, Michael. The other question that you have to have is who the hell is going to replace Dan Bylsma?
Mike Babcock is coming to Pittsburgh tonight. You didn't know that?
Yeah, that would work. And what's funny about Mike Babcock is he's won 1 cup in nine seasons at the helm. But he's a genius. I get it. Hey, I'm a Mike Babcock guy. I mean, I think he's a great coach. But it's funny that we kind of forget how difficult it is to win cups, whether you like Bylsma or not. The thing that really upsets me is if you are going to make a change, you let Peter Laviolette get out of your grasp, because he would have been a perfect choice for the job. Looks like Barry Trotz is going to probably take the Washington Capitals job. I wasn't in love with Barry Trotz to begin with, but if you were going to go with that kind of guy, I mean, who are you going to go out and get now? I mean, who's this disciplinarian? Maybe there's somebody that we don't know about, or maybe John can enlighten us on, but I just don't know that there's necessarily this great fit out there that's going to be able to walk into that locker room with guys like Crosby and Malkin, kind of running the show, I think, in a lot of ways, and make a change. And that's something that I'm worried about.
I don't have a huge list in front of me right now, and obviously guys like Mike Keenan and John Tortorella would be horrifying, but I'm not so sure that Dan Bilesma hasn't already lost the room. So you're either going to walk in with a guy like that. I mean, I could easily see them going with Jacques Martin. I mean, he's more of a defensive guy. He's already there, which I don't think is entirely, I don't think it's a coincidence that they brought him in after last year's debacle in the playoffs. But I understand what you're saying. You can't just hire any guy to walk in and try to command the attention of those two guys. But if you stick with Dan Bilesma, you're having a coach walk into a room that he lost during the playoffs, and that was evident. And it's already been widely reported, throughout the playoffs that, the superstars were frustrated with the coach. The rest of the players were also frustrated. I mean, there's that endless clip of Crosby and Bilesma screaming at each other on the bench. I don't see how you can turn around and whether people like it or not, the players run the show regardless, because they make all the money and they get all the jersey sales. But I don't know how you can tell, supposedly the best player in the league and the #1 marketing tool in your city, hey, you're going to have to play for this coach that you didn't really like last year, and you pretty much thought he was already gone. I just can't see. I can't see Dan Bilesma walking back into that locker room and commanding the respect of those players.
The players shouldn't run things. I'm sorry, that's in any sport. I don't think it's right that they do. I mean, that's a whole other.
They make all the money though.
Who cares? They're players. They're the coach. The coach is in charge of them. They play for them. They're replaceable.
But no, the coach is replaceable. The talent.
And the players are too. I'm sorry. That's ridiculous. The players play the game, and whenever they don't perform, they don't live up to the standards, it goes on to the coach. So now we're going to let the players run everything? No. That's ridiculous. Like Kobe Bryant wants to sit in and have a say on the Lakers coach. Why? You're a player. Are you saying you're above everybody else? No. That's not how it should be.
Because people show up to watch Crosby and Malkin. They don't show up to watch Dan Bilesma behind the bench in a suit. That's the reason. Whether it's fair or not, I'm not saying that it is. I'm just saying that that's the way the world is right now. I mean, if this was the 40s and the players were playing and they had part-time jobs on the side, it'd be different. But it's just not that way anymore. These guys make $8-9 million a year, and they bring back 10 times that amount to the city and the team based on all the jersey sales and everything else. So, those guys are going to stay, and the coach is going to go. And I just, and it'd be one thing if it was one player being a sour apple, but it sounds like it was the whole team. And just to me, I just don't see how you can bring him back.
Nah, we can get into that discussion later, but we're out of time today because nothing irks me more when a player tries to have a say and all that kind of stuff. That's ridiculous.
Hey, Michael, just to augment your point, how many Stanley Cups did Mario Lemieux win as a player after he basically whined, cried, and screamed and kicked to get Scotty Bowman fired after they won a Stanley Cup? They didn't win any. And you know how many that Scotty Bowman won after he left? How many more rings he added? 3. 5 appearances in the Stanley Cup, 3 rings. And hey, Mario Lemieux has done a great job as an owner, all things being considered. He's been the savior, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know what? He was a guy with a 10th grade education as a player who came in. He was the best player in the league when healthy. Sorry, Wayne Gretzky. But you know what? He tried to run the team. I know, I'm sorry, Mike. I know Wayne was pretty good. But either way, he was a guy who had way too much influence in the locker room. And, he was a Haley's Comet. He scored 60 goals. He was a great player, but they never won. And it was because he had way too much influence in how the Penguins were run, what type of players came in. They lost their system. When they had that system under Scotty Bowman, baby, they were an awfully great team. And, I don't want. I know we're a little out of time, but, I worry a little bit the same type of thing is happening with the next great player in Sidney Crosby. And sometimes the players just need to play, and they need to trust the people that are running the organization to make decisions. Because when you have too much of the ear of Ray Shero or whoever is running an organization, you're going to run into problems. I'm sorry, because players are not supposed to be general managers, particularly when they're in their mid-20s and, that's all they've ever done. Because, you can see it in all different aspects of sports. I mean, whether you're talking about Magic Johnson as a coach, I mean, sometimes just because you're great at something as a player doesn't mean that you can take that next step and run an organization or coach an organization. And I'm real worried about that with the Penguins.
Well, that is all the time we have today. So, time for a quick final word. I mean, we've all went on little rants during this past hour and 5 minutes or so. But heck, why not one more? So whoever has something planned, go ahead, because I do not. I kind of wasted all my energy on Jason Grilli, so I'll try to find something else here real quick.
Well, I'm not going to give you guys much prep time because I did go on a few tangents today. I'm going to keep it short and sweet and simple. Thank you to all of our veterans, both past and present, who give us everything that we have here in this world. You know, we all have different opinions on how to get to point A to point B in this world, and we may not always agree on everything, but one thing I think we can all be in agreement is we would not be in this great country that we have, living the lives we do, talking sports, firing up the grill, just enjoying everything that we have without our veterans. Thank you so much for all that you do.
Well said. And John?
Well, see, now he always brings out these nice messages, and now I got to go back and talk about sports again because you can't just say the same thing. I ditto to what you just said, Gar, but I was going to talk about high school teammate that is in AAA with the Cardinals, but forget it. The Ray Shero, Dan Bosma thing still has me a little bit going. So I'll say this. I think for every Scotty Bowman that you can look at 5 or 6 Lindy Ruffs, you know, a guy who coached in Buffalo for 10, 11 years, and they never really came close to winning anything. You know, I think that a change is necessary, especially when you look at the way that, you know, the team had kind of fallen off and the way that even before the playoffs, how they just didn't seem to have it going after the Olympic break. I think that Ray Shero is very good at trading, but that's about it. I think people way overvalue Ray Shero. I think people that are worried that he's going to go to Washington and take the GM job there should probably just hang on a little bit because, you know, we talk about the James Neal trade. We talk about the trade for Hossa and Dupuis. But for, you know, he brought in those two, you know, those 3 guys, you know, along with Niskanen, along with, you know, a guy in Chris Kunitz, and he didn't really give up a whole lot. But at the end of the day, Ray Shero is walking out the door with a team that, or you know, depth-wise, they have no depth at forward in the entire organization. They have nobody that can replace, you know, guys like Dupuis or Kunitz, forcing, you know, it forced Ray Shero to re-sign them to these ridiculous deals, $3-4 million for a 35-year-old over 4 years. You know, their cap space is very, very limited, so they don't have any room to make any real moves during free agency. They basically have to try to trade away some of these guys. And other than James Neal, they just really don't have the pieces to do that either. You're not going to get a lot for Chris Kunitz. You know, Pascal Dupuis coming off ACL surgery. He's 35 years old. Nobody's going to want Rob Scuderi and the rest of his, you know, $9 to $10 million contract for the next 3 years. And Chris Letang, $7.5 million a year starting this next season. You know, he's a stroke victim. I'm not going to hold it against him, but I know every other team will. And I just feel like, you know, as much as people may think that we miss Ray Shero, they need to take a look at the bigger picture and realize that, you know, he had a Ferrari and he tried to, you know, go four-wheeling in it, and it just didn't work out. So hopefully whoever comes in next can kind of sort out this mess and maybe, you know, create another Stanley Cup caliber team before Crosby and Malkin's years are, you know, our best years are over.
All right. And mine goes to the Oregon coast. To go to a movie, I had to drive an hour yesterday. That is ridiculous. You need to get more movie theaters within a 30-mile radius. Going along the coast where I'm falling behind RVs, tractor trailers, is preposterous. There's no point for that. Somebody get a movie theater in here. I'll help pay for it because I do not feel like doing that, and I love going to the movies. So, yeah. That's all the time.
Already starting.
What?
It's already starting. He'll be back in Pittsburgh in less than a month.
Yeah, I will bet every penny I have on that one just because every penny I have couldn't get me back to Pittsburgh if I wanted to. So, guys, that's all the time we have. The Pirates look to sweep the Nationals today. That'd be the first time the Nationals get swept in a 4-game series since 2009. So tune into that. Tune into another episode next week if I can wake up early enough. For Gar Mercury, enjoy the game. John Penline, safe trip back to Pennsylvania. And I'm Michael Waterloo. We'll see you next week, Pittsburgh. Take care.